segue beautifully into my portion of the presentation, which is talking specifically about the communication from our district. And I always say that I have the best job in the world because my job is to celebrate and shout from the rooftops the cool things that our kids do every day. Because they do so many amazing things, and the community should know about it because these are our kids, these are our accomplishments as a community, as a society. However, sometimes things happen where we're dealing with crisis communications, and we have to communicate just as effectively, we have to communicate a little bit differently. Something you should know is that we are always communicating. The question is just, are we communicating well, or are we communicating poorly? And there are so many different ways in which we can do that, especially in a digital age, which Chief Hoffman mentioned, and I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But like I put on the slide, the best time to let students, faculty, and families know what to do and how to get information in an emergency is before it happens. Now, that's why Mr. Smith said what he said at the beginning. We go through plans and procedures every year, reviewing what the protocols are, what we should do, how we should communicate with families in the event of an emergency. That being said, a lot of people do. They immediately turn on the news. They immediately look to social media. You have to know that as a district, our focus and our priority is always going to be our internal public. That means if there was an accident, or if there was a fire, if there was an emergency, the news media is going to start calling you. And they're going to start calling you right away. They're going to keep calling. They will start tweeting things, breaking news, fire at XYZ. They will start putting information out there. Yes, it is my responsibility to respond to them promptly, accurately, and in a truthful manner. But our priority is our internal public. So before we are going to worry about what WTHR or WRTV or Wish TV, I gotta be equal opportunity here and say them all. Before we worry about what they're saying, our priority is making sure our kids know what's going on, our parents know what's going on, our employees know what's going on. So that's what we call our internal public. So after we have addressed the internal public, then we move to the external public, which is largely associated with as being media, but it's just the community at large. So by being part of the Lawrence Township family, you are part of the internal public that I'm referencing. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about the characteristics of how we communicate. I just came up with 5 words that I thought sort of tied it together. Connected, participatory, open, conversational, and community focused. And to elaborate a little bit more, I say we're connected. Things happen in real time. Chief Hoffman said that. Social media has changed the game. The information is out there, it's out there instantly, and it's out there for good. We are connected with one another 24/7. That's a good thing though, generally. We have a lot of information to get out there, and we have a lot of different ways in which we can get that information to our clientele. And you'll see our students communicate differently socially than their teachers, who might communicate differently socially than our parents. So we have to meet them where they are. So we have to get connected, which is why you'll see Dr. Smith is on Twitter. The district is on Twitter. We're putting out posts on Facebook every day. We put out pictures on Instagram. We post things to our website. We use our mobile app. We communicate with you where you are. So that's part of our pledge, to be connected. We're participatory in that we engage in relevant conversation. This is a perfect example. Finding out from families, you want conversation about how our district keeps students safe. What are current initiatives? We want you to participate in that conversation, and here in just a minute, we're actually going to take some of your questions, and some of your questions prior to this evening's event guided the conversation that got us where we are. It's open. We can always learn more. There are always things we can be doing better. We are prepared to grow. We want to push ourselves. We're trying new things. It's conversational. We want to hear from you, and it is certainly community focused, as evidenced by our relationship with local law enforcement. So those are just a few characteristics of our communication, and then I actually touched on this. These are ways in which we do communicate with you. Our website, Skyler, which is the phone messaging system. I know you receive Sunday phone calls from principals. Our mobile app, if you don't have it, that's a great way to get announcements, maps, phone numbers, alerts, that's available. Text or voice messaging. Our high schools are doing a great job implementing a program called Remind 101, where they're actually using text messaging to communicate with students about events. Social media, which I touched on, and then obviously media releases and press conferences. So that's a little bit about communication from the district perspective. Like I said, questions that were submitted guided the conversation, but since we've been here, we have actually had a couple submissions of questions that we'd like to address. Mrs. Austin, were there any others? Oh, we got a couple more. We got 3? Fantastic. So what I'd like to do is I'll read the question and then we will determine who up here on our panel would be the most appropriate respondent. We should be able to get through these, but if you do think of something, please feel free to write it down along with a contact phone number or email, and someone will be happy to follow up with you. So here's our first question. Knowing that there has never been an active shooter carry out their actions through a locked door, can you please explain why classroom doors are not closed and locked when students aren't in them?
Great question. I want to start off with just explaining what our classrooms are equipped with first. We do have what we call a Columbine lock, which means staff can lock their door from within, not having to go out in the hallway to lock it and then come back in. It's a quicker way of doing business, if you will. Buildings also, to address the question why some are, why some are not. And I think the buildings, based off their day-to-day operation, can make that choice of how they operate day-to-day. We're seeing more and more of those become locked all day long. We're also, to minimize that thought process, our buildings are what we call a semi-lockdown every day, where you as a parent come in have to be buzzed in. That's just another form of security that we have in place. And the next step is internal within the building, and that's another option that we can do as a building, and the building does the job.
All right, thank you. Our next question, I'm going to be handing it right back to you, Garrett, is 42 staff are trained formally in safety. What exactly does that mean?
Great question. What is safety? It's more tailored to school safety. Indiana Department of Education has put together what they call is Indiana School Safety Academy. And what that is they bring in experts across the nation that deal specifically with school safety. And how do they, actually, I'm trained every year. Once you're trained every year. You have to go back to that training to be certified each year. And the experts train us based off what is happening throughout the nation during that year and prior to. And seeing trends and events that are happening and bringing us all aware of what is happening, number one. Number two, school safety, what devices, what technology, what type of resources are available to us as a result of what has happened throughout our nation. So we have current events we're currently being taught on. Protocols, emergency plans, those type of things are all re-established each and every year. So school safety pertains strictly for school safety, I think is the main emphasis of the Department of Ed. And then we get to bring that information back to our local schools and districts.
Okay, thank you. And our last question. I appreciate the general communication from Lawrence Township, but transportation communication has been poor when buses are late or do not arrive. Is there a process in place for addressing this challenge to be rectified?
Yes, transportation. As you well know, I think if I go back 5 years, the amount of growth that we have seen in our transportation department, organization, operation is moving in the right direction. Can we always do better? Yes, indeed. And I talked about earlier about the cameras, the GPS, and the technology. We're talking about how can we communicate quicker to our parents if a bus is going to be late. Right now, if we know it's going to be late, if that's communicated back to the central office in transportation, we can do a voice app through SkyAlert out to the parents. That's not effective all the time. We're looking at some mobile apps that will allow us and the parent to actually see and be notified automatically when that occurs. So we are constantly looking at ways to improve communication to our parents, especially as a result of transportation. Where is your child at? Or when is that bus going to be there? Time-wise, because in the AM, parents have got to get to work. They have other places to go. It's a timing issue. So we're constantly trying to improve those efforts.
Okay. Mrs. Austin, do we have any other questions? Okay. Well, that concludes our evening of the conversation around district safety initiatives. We're so glad that all of you could be here this evening. We'll see on our next slide the follow-up, well not follow-up, but our upcoming prep events for the school year. So please be sure to mark your calendars. As I indicated, these were a result of input that we got from families, and I know that Mrs. Austin also shared that if you have something that you think would be a relevant topic to be addressed in the future, we definitely want to hear from you. So again, thank you so much for being here this evening, and we hope you have a wonderful night.